to have you join us today. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee-Jiun in Seoul. We have plenty of stories lined up for you today, so let's get started with a look at the day's highlights. Korea's exports to China fall for the 13th month in July, recording the longest period of negative growth as China continues to grapple with slowing demand at home. We'll sit down with an expert to take a look at what 6 months of negative interest rates in Japan have delivered so far for the world's third largest economy. These stories and more coming right up. Is it time for Korea to review its growth strategy? The prospects for a strong pickup in Korea's export market are fading as the global economy has yet to pick up steam. And that includes China, Korea's largest trading partner. Our Kim Min-ji starts us off.
Korea's exports have fallen every month for over a year and a half now, and there had been hopes of a recovery in the second half of the year. But with the slow growth in the global economy, especially China, the prospects for a turnaround are dimming.
China accounts for about a quarter of Korea's exports, which is an important factor determining whether Korea's outbound shipments can improve. Exports to China have fallen sharply, so it depends on how much it can pick up.
According to the Korea International Trade Association, Korea's exports to China came to $10.1 billion in July, down 9.4% from a year ago. That extends the country's downward streak for a record 13 straight months. However, in a glint of light, the pace of decline did slow from the previous month. Imports shrank over 8% to just over $7 billion during the same period, resulting in a trade surplus of about $3.1 billion. Exports of key items such as semiconductors and flat panel displays led the decline in outbound shipments. Semiconductors, Korea's #1 export item to China, fell over 14% from the same period last year, while display panels fell more than 19%. But petroleum products spiked 35%, while auto parts also jumped nearly 13%.
Until now, growth has been centered around exports of intermediary goods, but Korea now needs to focus on consumer goods and ramp up investment in areas it is good at, such as food products, cosmetics, and cultural content, and open new markets.
Another option for Korea is to diversify its export partners and reduce its dependence on China. One country where analysts see potential is Vietnam, which has risen as Korea's third largest export partner thanks to a free trade deal that took effect last year, and as it is a production base for many companies. However, experts say that at the end of the day, for a tangible recovery, it's all down to how soon the global economy picks up steam, which will in turn drive up the demand for exports. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
Meanwhile, Korean imports of crude oil from Iran have more than doubled in the second quarter. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said Asia's fourth largest economy purchased a total of 25.3 million barrels of oil in the April to June period. Now that's 123% more than the same period last year when economic sanctions were in place over Tehran's nuclear weapons program. Still, there's a long way to go to fully reinstating the trade relationship with Iran, which had been one of Korea's largest suppliers of oil in the pre-sanctions years. With this boost in cheaper Iranian crude, Korea's overall oil imports in the second quarter also saw a lift of 4.5%. Samsung Electronics has posted an all-time high market share in the global DRAM market in the second quarter, grabbing 61.5%. According to industry tracker DRAM Exchange, this is 1.1 percentage point higher compared to the previous quarter. Another Korean chipmaker, SK Hynix, followed with a market share of about 25%, trailed by Micron with 11%. In terms of sales, Samsung sold roughly $2.4 billion worth of mobile DRAM in the April to June period, logging 19% on-quarter growth. DRAM Exchange says the global DRAM market grew about 17% on average, largely due to increased orders from Chinese smartphone makers like Huawei, Oppo, and Vivo. We're seeing electricity usage peak here in Korea at this time of the year amid soaring temperature and humidity levels. In years gone by, Korea has suffered power outages, so there's a growing sense of urgency about developing more renewable and sustainable energy sources. For a closer look at those efforts, here's our Kim Ji-yeon.
The scorching summer heat can easily force anyone to turn on the air conditioner, despite concerns of electricity bills and the impact on the environment. That's why there's a rising demand for cleaner and more sustainable energy sources than those derived from fossil fuels. In response to such demand, Hanwha Q-Cell factory of Eumseong, an hour-and-a-half car ride from Seoul, specializes in making solar modules with a production capacity of 1.5 gigawatts per year. And that's equivalent to 44 million panels, or the amount of electricity used by 2.5 million people a year. Some of that is used to provide electricity to local households, while the rest is exported overseas, mainly to the US and China. Each solar module contains 60 or 72 solar batteries, depending on whether it's for residential or industrial use. Hanwha Q-Cell says its highly efficient modules have helped the company reach operating profits of $1 million for the first time in 2015. Its modules have energy efficiency of 19.5%, one of the highest in the world, and which set a global record in December.
We coat the surface of the module with a layer of aluminium in order to prevent voltaic loss. This way, each module is able to produce more than 340 watts of electricity at once.
The company has similar module plants in China and Malaysia, while a solar energy-based power plant is being built in Austin, U.S. state of Texas, scheduled to be complete by the end of 2017. Meanwhile, a team from Daegu University say they've come up with a way to produce hydrogen from marine plants after 6 years of research.
Since the Korean peninsula is surrounded by 3 seas, I thought it would be more sustainable to find an energy source from marine vegetation rather than from plants and trees living on land. I thought it would be an interesting subject for research, as not many studies have been done on aquatic plants as a source of energy.
The professor says there were a lot of challenges ahead since marine plants are mainly composed of glucose, which is difficult to decompose to produce hydrogen. However, the team was able to achieve that by using a cocktail of fungi to take the plant apart instead of the usual method of inserting a single type of microorganism into it. The professor says despite such breakthrough, there's still a lot to do to mass-produce the technology, including finding sustainable methods of cultivation, as well as more research in other related sectors, such as metabolism engineering. Kim Ji-yeon, Business Daily.
It's been 6 months since the Bank of Japan rolled out negative interest rates. And over time, the effects and drawbacks of Japan's experiment with unconventional monetary policies have come to the fore. Take a look.
Since 2012, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been fighting the country's ailing economy by using his own brand of economic policy known as Abenomics. It's often referred to as a 3-pronged economic shock therapy, consisting of dramatic monetary easing, robust fiscal policies, and measures to spur private investment. And back in February, the Bank of Japan put its negative interest rate policy into action, saying it will help the Japanese economy grow by stimulating investment and consumption. But half a year later, Japan's debt is nearly 2.5 times the size of its economy, while its workforce continues to shrink due to the country's rapidly aging population and a chronically low birth rate. Experts say the BOJ's negative interest rate plan has failed to produce the desired effects and have suggested Japan provide stronger fiscal stimulus until inflation hits the 2% target. It's on the back of this that the country's cabinet approved a $275 billion stimulus package earlier this month to help bolster the Japanese economy. With the BOJ set to review how effective its negative rates policy has been in pulling the country out of deflation next month, the question is, will the drawback seen so far prevent the bank from diving deeper into negative territory?
And to tell us more about this, Professor Shin Se-don of Sungmyung Women's University joins us in the studio today. Hello, Professor.
Pleasure.
All right, so Japan's economic growth grounded to a near halt in the April to June period, expanding by an annualized 0.2% in the second quarter, which was largely below expectations. So what does this tell us about the effects of Japan's negative rate policy?
Well, at best, we could say disappointing in the sense that the last year, 2015, growth rate for the Japan was 0.5%. And the first quarter, it was 0.5, and second quarter, 0.2. So, despite the record-breaking supply of funds and negative interest rates, the growth of Japan has been actually declining. And on the other side, the inflation in 2015, it was 0.8%, but the first half of this year, it was almost 0%. So no seeming, economic growth, and inflation still ailing Japanese economy, even with record-breaking supply of money and negative interest rates. So pretty much disappointing to the Japanese government and the Bank of Japan.
Now, do you think that it is fair for us to say that the policy is not having the intended effects?
Definitely. Well, we could say that, there has been a lot of quantitative easing in the United States since 2008 and 2012, in the European Union and all over the world. Every country are pouring money into the system, but you can't find any country with a very dramatic increase in economic growth rate. So we could safely say that monetary policy alone cannot stimulate economic growth.
Now, ever since Japan decided to lower its rates below zero, what kind of impact do you think this has had on the global economy as well as other countries' decisions when it comes to monetary policies?
Well, we will be able to see many countries like Netherlands, Denmark, Switzerland, even Germany. You could find negative interest rates in the market. So those countries with a lot of supply of money, the market interest rate goes down below zero, meaning that it's kind of a penalty of holding those currencies. But the reason that you could rationalize the negative interest rate on that kind of currency is that people are expecting, even though you lose, interest rate on that currency, you are expecting earning in the value of their currencies. So generally, those currencies with high expectation of appreciation, negative interest could be rationalized.
There were also concerns, though, that a weak yen could actually deal a blow to Korean exporters, which now turns out that the yen is actually strengthening. So how has all this affected the Korean economy up until now?
Well, couple of years back, yen has been very weak, but ever since Japan has actively involved in negative interest rate, Japan all of a sudden become very strong. The reason for the strength of the yen is that private banks and the private corporations, Japanese banks and corporations are seeing that the risk all over the world, and they found that holding their own currency, which is yen, would be pretty safe. So that's why, amid all those negative interest rate and quantitative easing all the world, Japanese corporations and banks are deciding to hold their currencies, and that is the main reason why Japanese yen has been so strong.
Now, what other options remain on the table for Japan to, boost its sluggish economy?
Well, actually, I think there hasn't, it's really no options for Japan because they have been employing a lot of quantitative easing for more than, a few years and the negative interest rates, and there hasn't been any sign of improvement, economic growth and inflation. So, monetary policy alone cannot solve the trouble. Here comes Japanese government fiscal policy, but in 1990s and early 2000s, Japanese government has employed a lot of expensive fiscal policy, but still, they haven't been successful in stimulating economic growth. So actually Japan has no options either, monetary policy or fiscal policy. So they have to wait in a global economy, especially China and the United States economy would pick up. And that's the only solution for Japan's economic growth in the future.
Not many solutions there. But the Bank of Korea has also been facing growing pressure for more monetary easing amid more countries, I guess, implementing negative rate policies. So what kind of approach should Korea take from here on out when it comes to its monetary policies?
Well, everybody's talking about quantitative easing in European Union, United States, Japan. But actually, Korea has been very active in quantitative easing, especially since 2013. So Korea is one of the active countries which employ the quantitative easing, and we also haven't seen any improvement in economic growth. So it's not a matter whether Koreans should, adopt a quantitative easing or negative easing. Actually, we've been doing that for more than 3 years, and we have found no quantitative result. So I think Bank of Korea also faces the same question and the problem as Bank of Japan have been facing for the last 3 years.
So we're all running out of options here,
Right.
I guess. Thank you so much for your insight today, Professor.
You're welcome.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.